according to our rules, and it is also being conducted remotely. The contact information was included in the media announcement, so if someone wanted to join, they would be able to. Item 1 is the roll call. If I could ask Carrie to do the roll call, because I find that difficult when we're remote.
Yes. Mayor Kim Smith.
Here.
Tom Smith.
Here.
Well, the channel does,
Stevens?
but it's just
I am present.
Okay. Stephen Knott.
Present.
Jim Olson.
Present.
Diane Wolf.
Here.
Thank you. Everyone is in attendance. Item 2 is approval of the minutes from the previous meeting.
I move that we
Diane
approve
makes the
the
motion to
minutes from
approve.
the previous meeting.
Sorry. I'll
Okay,
second
we'll
that.
go with, okay, Alder Stevens made a motion to approve. And Alder Wolf made the second. Is there discussion on the approval of the minutes? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. Item 3 is public input. If there is public that would like to address the committee, now is the time to do so. Please state your name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anyone on the line who would like to address the committee? If there's anyone who would like to address the committee, now is the time to do it. We'll give you a little pause in case you're trying to connect. Do you see anything, Amanda?
No, everybody is self-muted. So if they wanted to talk, they would just need to unmute and begin talking.
Okay, I'll just ask one last time if there's anyone from the public that would like to address the committee. Okay, not hearing any, then we'll continue on with the agenda, which includes consideration and possible action on the following items. Item 4 is ratification of the mayoral proclamation for emergency order number 5. This proclamation was issued on May 14th and addressed the program for opening the playgrounds, parks, and recreation. It also addressed a plan for opening city buildings, and it also reversed the emergency order 4, which was about the direct seller permits. So I'd like to ask the council to please ratify emergency order number 5.
Mayor, I will make a motion that we approve the mayoral proclamation for our emergency orders number 5.
I will second that.
Thank you. We have a
Tom?
motion on the floor by Diane Wolf, seconded by Tom Smith, to ratify mayoral proclamation for emergency order number 5. Is there discussion?
Yeah. It's Alderman Knott.
Alder Knott?
Yeah, so actually, I think this is a great move in the right direction. And I applaud city staff for identifying objective ways and to, I guess, make playgrounds safer and open up the parks. I do have questions on some of the wording on this, and it basically is when it is safe and when it's safely possible. Those are very subjective criteria, and I'm wondering what criteria is going to be used and who is going to determine that is the big the question I have. I guess that's it.
Thank you, Alder Knott. And I think that the order was intentionally worded that way. And as you can see, the item number 6 is discussioning of reopening of City Hall to the public. So I mean, I anticipate that those discussions will be led by Eric and staff and communicated and approved by the council, I guess was my vision for this.
Okay, I'll hold off comments till then. That makes sense to me too.
Okay. Any other comments? Eric, would you like to add something or not? Not yet. No. Okay.
Not this
All right.
time.
Any other discussion? The motion on the floor is to ratify emergency order number 5. All those in favor, please say yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Those opposed say no. Sorry. Okay. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And then item number 5 is discussion and action on mayoral proclamation for emergency number 1. I guess I will ask for council input as to what discussion you would like to have on emergency order number 1.
So-
I'll recognize Alder Knott.
Right, I'll start it. So, yeah, this actually, I think, is also a subset of the 20-2020 emergency declaration as well. And I'm starting to question the validity of some of these. And again, I will hold off a lot of the conversation, I think, because a lot of it, I think, will be covered when we talk about the opening of City Hall as well. But I think it's very important that as our city and its citizens begin to return to normalcy, that the government needs to as well. And so along with that, I think that we're approaching a time where we need to really consider when the emergency order and all the proclamations that have made temporary adjustments to how we do business is no longer valid, and we need to go back to business as usual. And again, that doesn't mean we don't have to have controls under business as usual that are different than before, such as anyone who's more comfortable wearing a mask, obviously they could do that at work. You know, that's fine. But I think that we really need to start moving in the direction of the city needs to get back to full functioning again. And again, I think that after we listen to what Eric has to say, we'll probably have a better idea of how to do that and how quickly to do that.
Okay, any further discussion or action on item 5, mayoral proclamation for emergency order 1? Okay, so we're not taking action on this item at this time?
I know that I was requesting some of this, but when I take a look at the discussion on the reopening of City Hall to the public, and I read the memo that Eric sent, I think that's probably the right portion to have these discussions on what my concern was, because he's going to cover quite a bit of it, and then I have some other additional concerns, of course, which I'll bring up. But he's got some very good objective criteria inside of his memo that addresses some of my concerns. So I will hold off until then.
Okay, if everyone's comfortable, then we'll just take no action on that and we'll move to item 6, discussion and reopening of City Hall to the public. And if everyone's okay with that, I'll turn it over to Eric and he can outline the plan so much as what he has developed so far. Is that the wish of the council?
Sure.
Okay, Eric, I'll turn it over to Eric. Thank you,
Right.
Eric.
Thank you, Mayor. So I included both in the mailbox yesterday, and then I did as part of a global email I sent out late Thursday night going into Friday morning for employees. The included a discussion. I had 3 points as an update on Thursday morning, 2 which I think apply to the conversation here about City Hall. First one was about travel and opening up travel to more parts of the state and only be concerned about hotspots. Recall of staff. That statement was meant to state that obviously before City Hall's open to the public, we need to get the staff recalled as necessary. Mentioned that there's potentially getting back to a standard way of doing business, I think is a great way of saying it. It doesn't necessarily mean exactly how the old way of business was doing. We have been able to identify potential efficiencies and new ways of doing some business, which I think in some degree you may see continuing forward. For example, inspections, some of that may be still done remotely versus on site. It's been found that we can better schedule them and avoid the scheduling it, and then they show up, waste drive time, get there, they're not ready for it, drive back, back to the office. Instead, we can do some of this remotely. That's just one example, but there may be ways that we can, recall staff, but it may look slightly different than before. But taking advantage of the opportunity of remote working, to identify ways we can actually do our jobs better. And then the question at hand really is reopening the facility. I really kind of created 3 guidelines. I didn't really just invent them on my own. These are really referencing like CDC guidelines, which are broad and numerous. I wanted to boil it down to a way that made some sense and to reflect what I have found talking with employees and members of the public, and see what we can do. So the first standard that I would like to see accomplished is safe employees. We did surveys with employees as to the kind of equipment they feel they would need to do their individual jobs back in front of the public. And so it's their personal work environment things. So gloves, face masks, hand sanitizer, wipes. So some of those tools they need so they can feel confident and safe in their work environment. Second standard prior to opening was the safe building, that the facilities themselves must be perhaps reinvented so that the public and the environment feel safe in that. But these are the physical changes to the building. And the biggest one, as I mentioned here, is the glass breath divider. I think all the statistics are showing that the biggest risk factor is actually because of the droplets, at one exhale to one inhale, and so eliminating that an opportunity for that exchange. Work has been done on that, and we can Dan and I can talk about that later in terms of estimated dates. But some of the physical changes that must occur for the building to be safe. And then the safe public. We also don't want to necessarily invite the public back in and they feel it's an unsafe environment, so they need to interact with staff for as well. And some of those things may just simply be unidirectional flow of traffic. Are we looking at reduced or changed hours that focus people on certain areas or spread people out? And that this is the one that has been less to be determined. But the key thing is perhaps restricted access of buildings. More access that we have to the public, quite frankly, the more cleaning that we have to do, more frequent cleaning that we have to do. And we're not really set up to have staff to do that kind of repetitive cleaning overall. So that may be one area that we have to look at. I sum it up by simply saying that the work itself will dictate the opening date, that we're not going to create a false opening date. I want to assure the employees it's not my goal to open up as a race to be the first one open. We know in the area, La Crosse, city of La Crosse is looking at opening up on the 26th. The county of La Crosse has no plans of looking at reopening right now. And so they're on the other extreme there. And I think we can probably be in the middle and look at a summer opening to facilities in a way that the public mostly remembers how to interact and transact and do business with the city hall. And obviously, as Alder Knott had mentioned, there may be some changes that people will be impacting that as well. As for the safe building, the one I anticipate taking the longest to do, Dan perhaps get an update on that one, but we are looking at having the materials within potentially 2 weeks, and within a few days thereafter, be able to have at least the glass guards up at every counter in City Hall.
Thank you, Eric. Are there questions from the counselors?
Eric, did you say that you were
Alder
thinking-
Stevens.
Go
ahead.
Sorry, thank you, Your Honor.
That's-
Did you say that you were anticipating opening up City Hall in the summer? So months from now, or are we thinking weeks from now?
To be determined, but I would anticipate weeks versus months.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Yes, please.
Alder Knott.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I'm gonna be making some statements and I'm gonna be quoting some numbers, and I'm sorry, it may be tedious. It's probably gonna take a couple minutes, but you're gonna, I like to hope anyway, that you're gonna see there's a point behind all of this. And, first off, I'm concerned, and this is not just a local issue. It's certainly one that extends probably nationwide, but somehow there's been decisions made that we're changing the purpose of the restrictions and the reduced services from flattening the curve and making sure hospitals could handle any surge in demand for capacity, to now it is focusing on making sure that we are all safe, which is, it sounds nice, but there's challenges of that, because based on who and how we define safe very well can easily mean never return back to normal. And that is quite a move of the goalpost from where this all began. The military refers to this phenomenon as mission creep, and it's what results in our quagmires and some of our more nasty histories. And I'm very concerned that we are going to enter into a cultural or governmental quagmire if we focus on safe versus what the original intent was and how we meet that, and then how we can objectively and not subjectively have criteria for how we can improve some of the safety for our government employees in this case with what Eric was saying. Now, he's got some great stuff in there. You know, the plexiglass, I think that's a great idea, not just for avoiding any type of exposure to viruses, but I think it's also a good safety measure. So, you know, there's a lot of that in there, but anytime that we have until it's safe, it's so subjective. And then on top of that, we're relying a lot just based on conversations that I've had with a lot of the staff. And then what I'm seeing in some of the public, the enclosures here with the agenda, that we rely a lot on the county health department, and rightfully so. But they aren't the be all end all either. In fact, I think it's pretty clear to me that sometimes they have very good statistical analysis and sometimes they don't. Case in point, the travel restrictions for where the hot spots are. Now, when I looked at what they have for the counties, spot on. Good job. They really did a good job. Those are the counties where the hot spots clearly are. And by the way, what I'm using for when I look at where hotspots are and when I talk in this, I'm looking at a National Public Radio numbers map to include the per capita map from the 16th of May, and also a New York Times density map from the 16th of May. And again, I know that's 3 days old now, but that's what I had to go off because I wanted an apples to apples 16 May and 16 May. I don't want to be using older and newer type of data because now I'd be mixing things up. But based on that, when you look at the states with what the health department's telling us, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 of the states that they have on the hotspots map actually have anywhere from a 3.1% to a 68.2% less per capita rate of infections than Wisconsin. And then when you look at the 13 that are on they're not on the hotspots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them have anywhere from a 14.9% to a 149% greater per capita incidence of the disease. So, you know, some of the statistical analysis that's going on here that's going to be driving our decisions, I think really needs to be tightened up. And then on top of that, you know, this is clearly not a state issue. This is a metropolitan issue. And when you look at these density maps, it's exceedingly clear. That's shown within the counties that they've reported with Brown, Dane, Kenosha, and so forth that are on this list. Those are basically where Madison, Milwaukee, Green Bay, Racine, Kenosha, that's where they are. And they've recognized that within the state. But then when it's going outside the state, and the one I picked here was South Dakota, just for a quick analysis, you know, 80.2% of all the state cases in South Dakota, which is on the hotspot list, are from Sioux Falls, Minnehaha County, all right? 82%, but they only make up 28% of the state population. And what's not in there, because they have almost no cases or very low cases, are Rapid City, Aberdeen, and even Custer County, where Custer State Park is, which is going to be a destination for people for over the summer. And they're lumped in with, that's a hot spot. Custer County, where Custer State Park is, doesn't have a single case. And it's lumped in with hotspot of South Dakota. So what I'm trying to get here is that we got to be very careful when we're listening to statistics, because the health department has a skill set that is specific to health. And I don't know if they have a professional statistician on their staff or not. If not, I would encourage them that they would consider doing that, because a lot of the numbers that are coming out and driving our decisions into the future don't make sense to me at all.
Okay, thank you, Alder Knott. Is there another Alder person that would like to speak? Alder Wolf.
Thank you, Your Honor. First of all, I'd like to thank the staff for all the work that they've done during the last 2 months during the shutdown. These are very trying, fluid times that we've been through. Staff, administration, department heads, it's been a juggling act. Day to day, it's constantly changing. As an elected official, I'm not at City Hall. I don't know what they've gone through. So I want to thank them, first of all, for everything that they've been doing. And from everything that I see, it's business as usual at the City of Onalaska. Even though our doors may be closed, work is still getting done. The City of Onalaska has a number of assets, buildings, equipment, land, but I see our biggest asset is our employees. And without them, we have nothing. And that is not something that I pay lip service to. Everything I read, whether it be city, state, county, or private companies, when the topic is reopened in these trying times, safety of the workforce and the public is usually the lead. I'm not insinuating that anyone here is placing any less importance on the safety of anyone, but that's personally what I'm going to lead with. Following up on what Eric mentioned earlier, he mentioned what La Crosse County, what their intention is, and City of La Crosse. I did reach out to 4 municipalities and governments. I figured if they were abutting municipalities, it'd be nice to know what are they doing. When I talked with West Salem today, they are opening next Tuesday, the 26th. They will be 100% open. They've made their public works building. They'll have a makeshift plexiglass for the front counter, more cleaning and such. They have not gone to remote meetings because they just don't have the capabilities. And the city administrator has made the sole decision to close and then to reopen. Village of Holman, they are in 100% support of La Crosse County Health Department, and they have not made a plan to open facilities at this time. It possibly may be another month out or so before they even do that. They've been holding meetings in person. They've continued to do business, but in a controlled environment. And I believe just last Friday, the 15th, they did make the decision to close their pool for the season. City of La Crosse, like Eric mentioned, they open next Tuesday. I know there's new protocols and operations in place. They're going to be limiting a number of accesses to their buildings. And I think their hours are going to be like Monday through Thursday from 8 to 1. And lastly, La Crosse County, like Eric mentioned, they're having a safer at home approach for their buildings. I talked with the county chair today, Monica Cruz. They're trying to lead by example. Emergency order went to effect March 17th and is in effect for 120 days. They're going with a phased-in approach. I want to thank Eric for his email or his memo that he has sent out to everyone. I, for one, am very supportive of a more phased-in approach. I think anything that we as elected can do to, number one, protect our employees and make them feel as comfortable as we can. I'll be honest, I don't know whether or not we're going to be able to make 100% of everyone feel the absolute most comfortable. I'm not singling anyone out because I haven't talked with anyone personally about this, but I think we need to do what we can to make people feel comfortable. And I understand where Alderperson Nod is coming from, but I think at the end of the day, I look at the three-pronged approach that Eric has listed here, the safe employees, the safe building, the safe public. For me personally, that is the trend that I would be fully in support of. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Alder Wolf. Is there another Alder person that would like to speak that hasn't spoke yet? Alder Smith.
Yeah, thank you. Excuse me. I especially appreciate Eric's memo and his plan of attack. I think it's well thought out. I think it makes us look at, we're not ready yet, but what can we do to get to those steps? And so I would like to think that, our employees are important. And I agree with you, Diane, is that we really do need to make sure that they feel comfortable in their roles and being safe. I mean, that's our employees and our citizens. So it's definitely important. It's interesting because La Crosse is going to open next week. I'm curious to see how that goes. And we're not going to be the leading edge of that, but that's okay. This isn't a good example where we can kind of see how does it go and learn from it. I think in this kind of situation, I think lessons learned is probably better than being, the leading edge versus the bleeding edge. And I think in this kind of environment and in a smaller organization we are, and then you got West Salem, where everything's open. So I think we'll be able to kind of, we're all neighbors. We can kind of compare notes, learn from that. And hopefully be able to, I'm the first person to agree with Steve that I think we need to open quickly. I think it's our goal of government is to be there for the citizens. But also the citizens are a little apprehensive right now. So I think we all are. So I support Eric's approach. I think I'd love to see us do it sooner than later. But I think the phased approach and looking at what our other communities are going to do over the next couple of weeks should give us a good example. So I support that phased in kind of conservative approach, but it can't drag on through the summer. We really do need to have it happen sooner than later. But it has to be intelligently thought out, and we all agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Smith. I'm going to ask let's give everyone a chance to speak for the first time. Alder Olson is on the line, but I can't see him. Would you like to say anything, Alder Olson?
No, I think there's merit in what Mr. Knott has to say, and I did like what Alderman Smith just said, and I agree that we need to make that sooner than later. Time that we take a look at what this country was founded on, and that's freedom, and we need to get back to that as soon as we can. Thank you.
Yep, thank you for your comments. Alder Stevens, would you like to say something?
Yes, Your Honor. Steve's opening point was a good one. I think that moving towards opening is something that we should look at as a goal. I would be apprehensive to just open up the doors and let everybody come in. I think it would be problematic for staff, and it could cause, potential problems with how interactions with the public would go. So getting everybody back to work first, I think, is kind of important. Working the bugs out, imagining and running through scenarios. How will you interact with the public? What do you do if somebody comes in and they're not they could be aggressive or want to be more hands-on or too close with our staff than what we're comfortable with? I think we need a transition time to bridge through some of that. So I would like to get everybody back to work first. Maybe we wait a week or 2 weeks. Eric and department heads would have a better sense of how much time was enough time, but then use that kind of as baby steps, and we look for milestones. Like, are we actively doing what we need to be doing at this point, and how is this related to the current situation with COVID? Can we accelerate this? Can we move it forward to the next step? Or if there's a spike, are we prepared to peel it back some? And I think we need to identify what those milestones are and how we would make that directional change if need be. And it seems like Eric did a nice job kind of laying out the groundwork for that. So we need to open, but we need to be smart about it and be very calculating in how we do this. And finally, we have a different set of infrastructure and public, and then does West Salem or the county of La Crosse or the city of La Crosse or the state of Wisconsin. So while it's nice to look at what others are doing, ultimately what we really only care about is what works well for us. So I think we need to almost every day ask ourselves the question, what's the next step? What's the situation on the outside? And how can we best manage this for both the public and the staff? But we want to get to where we're open, but let's be smart about it.
Thank you, Alder Stevens. And I can add a little bit of information too. Although the city of La Crosse is opening on May 26th, they're not completely opening their city hall. They're just, the way their structure is, they can open, I think they're only opening the lower level of city hall. So it's not going to be like it's open and everything is back to normal. That is not what they're doing. They're just doing a very controlled portion of city hall open. And that reason is also the same reason why Holman is remaining closed, because the structure of their city hall is very open. And once somebody comes in, there's no way to restrict their flow and they don't know how to manage that at this point, and they're working on developing that. Just like Eric and the team are working on developing what it's going to look like at our city hall. But I just want to go back to Eric in case he wants a chance to say something, and then we can go around again if people have more comments. Eric, did you want to add something or?
I'm not particularly. I guess the one question is subjective versus objective. I think I'll just kind of repeat what Alderman Stevens just said, though, that my goal has always been what works for Onalaska, not necessarily following other standards that others create. It's what works for our organization and our public members.
Thank you, Eric. And Amanda, is there any legal considerations that are coming to mind as you're listening to our discussion? Something that we should maybe that we're overlooking or that should be considered, or do you think we're on stable ground here?
I think we're on pretty stable ground. The decision, and how we reopen our buildings is the city's decision at this point. I mean, without any other orders in place from any higher entities.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, would someone else like to speak? Alder Knott.
So I'll, since we're talking and I brought it up about objective versus subjective, I'll go out on the line and I'll offer an objective criteria that perhaps the city wants to bring to the county health department, because ultimately they'd be the one who have to be tracking those numbers. But the milestone I'd like to recommend is one that's actually based on, I'm plagiarizing. It's one of the main gauges that Texas is using, and that's on a 7-day moving average of testing versus positive rate. And we should be able to do that soon because the Omni Center is about to become a testing site with the National Guard. So how that is measured, it's not measured by the number of cases, because as I brought up actually in the meeting yesterday too, one of the potential fear factors that would be misleading in this is that if you increase testing, you're almost certainly going to find additional cases. That's not necessarily meaningful. What's meaningful as far as the statistics of it all is how many positives are you getting versus how many tests you're giving, and what's happening to those positive rates over time. So what you want to see is a declination on a trend analysis over time, that the rate of positives are going down. And that would indicate, I would argue, that your area, your region is becoming safer with this risk. So I'd be interested in a 10-day trend analysis. And if we can get a 10-day trend that shows it's a downward trend, then it's time to open, folks. And we can continue to do these other things until, and pursue them. But to wait until all of them are done, if the data is showing that we're actually pretty good here, I think we should move. And again, I want to really emphasize that if we're going to, this milestone I'm recommending would be a trend of 10 days. So, and if there's a spike and the trend is still down, that's just a data set in time. And I wrote some numbers down. So on day 1, we get 10 positives, and then we get 7, then 5, then, or 10%, I should say, positive, then 7, and then 5, and then 9, and then 5, 5, 4, 4, 3, 3. You had that 1, 9 spike, the trend line would still be down. It was just one day you had a spike, that's all. So, I mean, I don't know, it's open for discussion, but it would give us a measurable criteria we could stand on. And that's that we're going to get this testing. And if we can show a 10-day trend of downward motion of the testing versus positive rate, then we need to open up.
Thank you. Alder Stevens?
Thank you, Your Honor. If we were to adhere to that sort of guidepost milestone, I'm curious as to if the moving average went the other way, and let's say things started to spike seriously, what then? I mean, do you close everything back down? And I would pose that
discussion, because certainly it would show that we've got a potential risk factor that's increasing if the positive rate is actually going up instead of down.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say, Alder not, are you still?
No, I'm just saying, is that something we'd be willing to consider for a milestone? Because it's measurable. I think it's meaningful. And it's something I think that you could stand on that's reasonable as well.
Okay, is there any other Alder that would like to speak?
Can I just ask Alders, not, is that data, would that all be available? Like, Steve, I mean, is that data that we have or we'd have to get from the county or?
You'd have to get it from the county, I'm sure.
And they'd be
And
willing
that's what-
to
They
agree?
have to be willing to play with us on this and,
Yeah,
and
that's what I was
actually
thinking.
provide the information.
Yeah, we don't contain that. We would have to get that from the county. Okay, that's what I thought.
Thank you, thank you, Alder Smith, for that question, and Stephen Not for that answer. Let's go to Alder Stevens, and then Amanda Jackson will be next.
Sure. I think at this point, I myself am more comfortable with sticking to the plan, maybe with some tweaking that the city administrator has laid out. We'll need some time for the data to come in from the county and the Omni Center testing before we can look at moving averages. And it strikes me that I think in 3 weeks, we'll have another common council meeting, hopefully in chambers. So I don't know that I would recommend taking a specific action on a moving average guidepost at this point, but it's food for thought for the next council meeting. And in the interim, I think we should stick to the plan laid out by Eric.
Thank
I
you.
agree with you.
Okay, Alder Not,
I-
please hold. Alder Not, I've asked Amanda next, and then we can come to you after that. Amanda Jackson?
I just had a follow-up question, since I have tracked a lot of the data for the city, and we've sat in on several meetings with the county. One of the reasons they're doing the testing site on Thursday is due to the fact that even though they say we have a certain level of testing capacity, there hasn't actually been the expected number of tests being done that they would want. And so I guess my question just back to Steve was, would that be a factor? Because my understanding is they would like to be at well over 100 tests per day, and that's not being done right now in La Crosse County. So would that be considered a factor in that moving average or not?
I'd have to defer to a professional statistician on what is the density of tests that would become statistically significant. I don't know that answer. But I'd like to think that there are some folks either in the county or in the state that would have that answer. And my recommendation on that as a milestone isn't that we adopt it today. We don't have the information. So I'm with Alderman Stevens on this. Let's continue to move the goalpost or move the progress forward with our own progressive opening plan, I guess, with that Eric has outlined. But maybe by next time we meet, we will have that data, and that would be something we could consider. But the city it would be up to the city to work with the county in order to collect this type of data.
Right. Thank you, Alder Not. And I can add on to that a little bit as I was in conversation with Jen Romalski today, which maybe some of you saw the news conference or whatever it was called, a media session. And one of the things that she said is why these extra testing stations are so important is so that they can gather more data. She doesn't know her department, the health department, the professionals that are analyzing the data, they don't know where on the curve we are because they do not have enough data to say, is it rising? Is it falling? Is it plateaued? Is it doing anything? They don't know. There was one day, I know it was probably 2 weeks ago now, that we talked to her. And as far as I know, there was only 17 people tested in our county. Like, that isn't enough information to make any kind of decision. And obviously since then, there has been a big increase. And with these testing sites, we're getting even more data. So I am very optimistic by Common Council we'll have a better picture at this in order to be able to make a wise decision. But I just wanted to share that because I thought it was relevant to what Alder Not was saying. Is there any other counselors that would like to speak? So what is the pleasure of the committee?
Do we need a motion with what Eric has written?
Amanda Jackson.
You do not need a motion. So, I mean, generally speaking, with the mayor as a chief executive officer and the city administrator as a chief operating officer, the reopening plan would fall pretty squarely under their duties. So it would just be if the council wanted to pass any policy, you know, if they wanted to go on record to direct a resolution to some effect related to that, that they could do so.
Right, and I'll just add on to that a little bit that when I worded the most recent order, I did that with the intention to not take a stand one way or the other, but to leave it open so that we could continue to evaluate the data as it comes in, and make good decisions together, which is what we're trying to do. And I mean, I more than anyone appreciate the diversity of the committee and the different people's input. I think that's what helps us do a better job to represent our community and to serve our community. But Alder Stevens, I think you have your hand up.
Thank you again, Your Honor. And as I'm apparently going to be the contrarian to what you just said, about
good.
having everybody weigh in, you have executive authority right now. What's your opinion on this, if I can ask? And you're at City Hall more than most of the other alders. What is your view as the best way to roll back into business as usual?
Right, well, I mean, I think what maybe the public and perhaps the council lose sight of is that for many people at City Hall, it is business as usual. The police and the fire are operating business as usual. The plan commission, the inspectors, Eric and Amanda, like they're doing they're at work, they're doing their jobs, they're processing information from the community, the clerk's office and those people, they're processing the license and doing all the things they normally do. They're just finding different ways to do it. So it's more just a physicality with the building at City Hall. And I think that the plan that Eric has in place in conjunction with staff meets the concerns that we're having. I mean, this isn't a time, of course we want to be a leader, but this isn't a good time for us to be a leader. This is a time for us to be thoughtful about what we're doing, to be looking around, paying attention to what's happening in other places. And when we see good things happening, trying to model after it. So we've all been working very closely together and I support Eric's plan. I also support your comments. I don't want it to drag out all summer either. None of us do, but I also recognize that I don't think we should open City Hall to the public on the 26th. I think that we need to get those barriers in place. We need to get the staff back at City Hall. And then when we do open the door to City Hall to the public, we need to have their access to City Hall restricted, at least in the initial phases. But I really want to see that data come back from the test site and see where we're at. I'm really interested to see that, and if it comes back that things are going well, then I think the council meeting is going to be a really good place for another discussion about where we're at and what the next best steps are. So I think that pretty much covers it. Alder Smith, did you want to say something?
No.
Oh, I thought you were raising your hand, sorry.
No.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I'm not seeing or hearing anything, so then we'll move to item 7, discussion and recommendation on the aquatic center closure. And I guess I'll turn it over to Alder Knott, since he is the representative from the aquatic center.
So the Parks and Rec Board met yesterday, and Dan Wick had provided an updated costing model based upon some of the changes in the guidance that would have allowed them from going from 50 to 148 people in the pool at a time. Yeah, there still was a shortfall of funds that was not insignificant. There was a vote held on what the board recommended, and on a 6-to-1 vote, the board voted that we recommend that the pool be closed.
Okay, thank you, Alder Knott. Any comments or questions from the committee? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I will recommend that we follow the Parks and Recreation Board's recommendation of closing the pool for the summer.
Okay, thank you, Alder Knott. Is there a second?
I
I'll
will
second
second that.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll give it to Alder Stevens because for a second I thought it was gonna die for a lack of a second, and then Stephen Knott would have rejoiced.
Yeah, same time for lack of a second, that's my bailiwick, so I'll second it just so Steve can't take that from me.
So the motion on the floor is to close the aquatic center closure for 2020. Motion was made by Alder Knott, seconded by Alder Stevens. Is there any discussion? Alder Knott.
Sorry, I've been more vocal in this meeting than ever before.
That's all
So
right.
yeah, just to address one of the comments made earlier, and I mean, I don't take it personally or anything, but so I'm a big believer in the process that our republic is founded on, and whether or not I agree with the decision or not has no bearing on whether or not I can support that decision. The process yesterday at the board worked. We had our discussions. Yes, I disagreed with some of that, but in the end, that's irrelevant. It's about the process of democracy. And we had the discussions, we had the vote, and I can support what the Parks and Rec board decided is the bottom line. Doesn't matter if during the discussion I agreed with where it was going or not.
Thank you, sir, for that. Any other comments? Alder Smith?
Yeah, as much as I hate to see the pool close or not be open this year, I support that we do postpone and that we don't have it open this year. I just think that it's so late in the year now, having to have Dan and his staff to scramble to get people employed, to go up with all the red tape that would be required, the cost that it's going to cost us to do and to go over budget already. We've always struggled in Park and Recs with budget cuts all the time. Sometimes it always seems like a lot of times that area always gets a lot of the cuts of the budget when there's not enough money. So I would rather not spend that kind of money and hopefully maybe in a position next year, be in a better position to open with a bigger and better approach to the pool and just close it for this year and plan accordingly for next year and hopefully save us some money that would have been spent for a very short season. So I support the recommendation.
Thank you, Alder Smith. This also gives us an opportunity to complete some of the renovations that were scheduled for later this year, maybe at an earlier timeline that might be of money savings as well. Is there any other comments from the counselors? Questions? Alder Olson, did you want to say something?
No, that's fine.
Okay, sorry. All right, I'm not seeing any other discussion, so the motion on the floor is to close the aquatic center for 2020. Motion is on the floor. All those in favor, please say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion passes unanimously. Item 8 is adjournment.
Motion to adjourn, Diane?
Second by Tom.
We have a motion to adjourn by Alder Wolf, seconded by Alder Smith. All those in favor, please say aye.
I
Aye.
Say no. Motion carries unanimously. We are adjourned at 7:50 p.m. Thank you all for joining us.
I do want to point out, this is the first time that I didn't have a technical issue during a meeting.
Yeah, no, you
Yeah.
didn't. We heard you loud and clear. And thank you for all your comments and thank you all for caring so much about the city. It's really been a lot of interesting things going on and definitely appreciate the diverse viewpoints.
Stephen, did you do something different this time?
Adult years, so that's for sure.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording and end the live feed.
Okay,
Great, thank you.
Bye.